The city heard him before it saw him, not through drums, not through banners, but through silence. A silence moving across the plains like a storm without thunder. Behind the walls, men stood with bows in shaking hands. Mothers pulled children away from the gates. Merchants buried coins under floorboards. And far beyond the city, dust began rising from the horizon. At first it looked like weather. Then the guards saw the horses, thousands of them, moving fast, too fast. And at the center of that moving darkness rode a man who had already taught half the world one lesson. When Timur came for a city, the question was not whether it could survive. The question was, what would be left when he was finished?
To understand Timur, you have to begin far from palaces. In Transoxiana, between desert roads, mountain passes, and cities rich from the Silk Road, power did not come from crowns. It came from horses, from loyalty, from speed, from knowing when to kneel and when to kill. Timur was born near Kesh, close to Samarkand, in 1336, a world shaped by the broken remains of the Mongol Empire. But he was not Genghis Khan. That mattered, because in the steppe world, bloodlines were weapons. A man without the right blood could command armies, but he could not easily claim the sacred right to rule. So Timur did something more dangerous. He became the power behind the throne. He placed puppet khams where tradition demanded them, while every real order came from him. He did not need the title first. He needed obedience. And once men obeyed him, titles became decorations. On the map, his world began small, a cluster of cities, a contested frontier, tribes shifting loyalty like sand in wind. But Timur understood something most rulers forgot. Empires do not begin with land. They begin with fear. Timur's army did not fight like a slow kingdom. It moved like a predator. Cavalry crossed distances that should have exhausted normal armies. Scouts rode ahead. Spies entered markets. Messengers carried threats before the soldiers arrived. By the time Timur reached a city, its imagination had already surrendered. This was his first weapon, not swords, not arrows. Speed. A ruler in Persia would hear that Timur was far away. Then a week later, his border towns were burning. A governor would prepare for a siege, then discover Timur had bypassed the road entirely. An army would march to intercept him and find only dust. He made geography feel unsafe. Mountains were not barriers. Deserts were not protection. Distance was not time. Distance was only space Timur had not crossed yet. From Samarkand, the arrows spread outward. Khwarazm, Persia, the Caucasus, the steppe. Each campaign added more soldiers, more tribute, more fear, and every victory taught his enemies the same lesson. You could defeat an army. You could bargain with a king. But Timur was neither. He was momentum. And then there was Samarkand, his capital, the city he wanted the world to envy. Blue tiles catching the sun, domes rising above the Silk Road. Artisans, scholars, builders, craftsmen, all pulled from conquered lands and brought to the heart of his empire. This was the contradiction of Timur. He could destroy a city in horror, then use its finest hands to build beauty somewhere else. He was not chaos. That made him more frightening. Chaos burns without purpose. Timur burned with intention. Every campaign fed Samarkand. Every conquest became architecture. Every defeated people became labor, skill, ornament, warning. To his followers, this looked like greatness. To his enemies, it looked like a machine that turned cities into trophies. And the machine was still moving. North of Timur's world stood another power born from the Mongol legacy, the Golden Horde. For generations, its horsemen had terrified Russia and controlled the steppe routes. But Timur did not fear old nightmares. He hunted them. His conflict with Toktamish, ruler of the Golden Horde, became more than a rivalry. It became a war over who would inherit the shadow of Genghis Khan. The armies moved across the steppe like storms crossing an empty sea. There were no walls here, no city gates, only distance, endurance, and the ability to strike first. And Timur struck with terrifying patience. He chased, he waited, he maneuvered, then he crushed. When the Golden Horde weakened, the balance of the steppe changed. The old terror had met something worse. And now the road south was open. Persia would feel him next, then India, then the Middle East, then Anatolia. Each region believed it was facing a conqueror, but they were wrong. They were facing a pattern. By 1398, Timur turned toward India. Delhi was wealthy, crowded, powerful, but weakened by internal struggle. To Timur, weakness was an invitation. His army crossed the Indus. War elephants stood against horse archers. The heat changed. The air thickened. The cities grew larger, but the fear was the same. Delhi had seen war before. It had seen ambitious men. It had seen dynasties rise and fall. But Timur brought something different. He brought the cold logic of annihilation. Before the great battle near Delhi, his army faced elephants armored for war, massive animals, towering platforms, psychological weapons designed to break cavalry. For a normal commander, this was terror. For Timur, it was a problem to solve. He used fire, noise, movement, panic. He turned the enemy's greatest weapon into confusion. And when Delhi fell, the city did not experience conquest as administration. It experienced conquest as catastrophe. The streets filled with smoke. The markets died. The wealth moved out. And behind Timur's army, India was left to count what could not be replaced. But Timur did not stay. That was another part of the horror. He did not always want to govern what he broke. Sometimes, he only needed the world to know that he could break it. By the time Timur turned west again, his reputation traveled faster than his cavalry. In mosques, rulers whispered his name. In markets, refugees carried stories. Not clean stories, not heroic stories. Stories of pyramids built from skulls. Stories of cities punished so completely that resistance itself began to feel suicidal. Some of these stories grew in the telling, but that did not matter. Fear does not need perfect accuracy. It only needs belief. And people believed. Baghdad fell to Timur in 1401. Britannica records the city being taken by storm, thousands massacred and monuments destroyed. Imagine the message that sent. Baghdad, once the center of the Abbasid world, a city of memory, learning, and empire. Now, another warning on Timur's road. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. If you surrendered too late, you might still be destroyed. If you resisted, you became an example. And if you thought distance would save you, Timur was already moving. Then the map placed Timur before the one ruler who did not seem afraid. Bayezid I, the Ottoman Sultan, called the Thunderbolt. Fast, aggressive, victorious, he had terrified the Balkans, pressed against Constantinople, built an Ottoman power that seemed ready to dominate the Eastern Mediterranean. For the first time, Timur was not approaching a broken kingdom. He was approaching another storm. Two men, two machines, two visions of conquest.
and between them lay Anatolia. The letters between Timur and Bayezid grew sharper. Insults became warnings, warnings became threats, threats became movement. Bayezid marched east, Timur moved west. But Timur did not simply charge. He studied water, heat, roots, loyalty, fatigue. He understood that battles are not won only when swords meet. They are won before the enemy realizes the battlefield has already been chosen.
In July 1402, near Ankara, the Ottoman army arrived exhausted. The sun was brutal. The men were thirsty. The march had drained them. And then they discovered the nightmare. Timur had reached the water first. This was not just a battle. It was a humiliation engineered through movement. Timur had not simply beaten Bayezid. He had made the Thunderbolt arrive tired, thirsty, and strategically trapped. The Ottoman lines held, then bent, then cracked. Alliances shifted. Some Anatolian forces defected. The battlefield became a collapsing system. Dust swallowed the plain. Janissaries stood their ground. Horsemen circled like wolves. And somewhere in the chaos, Bayezid, the Sultan who had threatened Constantinople, was surrounded, captured, alive. For the Ottoman world, this was unthinkable. Their ruler was no longer a conqueror at the head of an army. He was Timur's prisoner, and the empire he had built began to fracture behind him.
But here is the strange truth about Timur. He could destroy empires faster than he could preserve his own. After Ankara, he moved west. Smyrna fell. Anatolia trembled. The Ottomans entered a crisis that would take years to recover from. And then, Timur turned again. Because still, somehow, the world was not enough. Old age had reached him, but ambition had not. His final dream was China. Another campaign, another horizon, another empire waiting beyond the cold. In 1405, on the road to that campaign, Timur died near Otrar. Not in a city he had conquered, not in the palace of an enemy, but on the move, as if even death had to catch him while he was marching. His empire did not hold together like Rome. It did not last like China. It did not become a stable world order. But maybe that was never what made Timur terrifying. Timur's true legacy was not permanence. It was impact. The feeling that history itself could be struck by a single will and forced to change direction. He left behind cities rebuilt in beauty and cities remembered for ruin. He raised Samarkand into a jewel and turned other places into warnings. He broke the Golden Horde. He shook India. He burned through Persia. He shattered Baghdad. He captured the Ottoman Sultan. And then, before the world could fully understand what had happened, he was gone. That is why Timur feels different from other conquerors. Alexander chased glory. Genghis built a world-changing empire. Caesar wanted Rome. But Timur moved like a disaster with a strategy. And for the people watching dust rise on the horizon, there was no time to ask what he wanted, only whether they would survive long enough to find out. Because when Timur came for a city, history did not arrive as a lesson. It arrived as hoofbeats.